My name is Kenya Matthews. I'm 32 years old, and for the past decade, I've made a living defending people the world calls monsters. Criminal defense isn't about sympathy, it's about facts, strategy, and surviving pressure. I thought I had seen every form of cruelty human beings were capable of. I was wrong. 3 days ago, my identical twin sister walked into my law office, and my entire world collapsed. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon. No court hearings, no juries, just paperwork and cold coffee. When my assistant buzzed my office, her voice was tight with worry. Kenya, your sister is here, but she doesn't look okay. Before I even opened the door, something inside me went cold. When she stepped in, I barely recognized her. She was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, long sleeves, a high neck sweater in the middle of summer. She moved carefully, like every step hurt. Her shoulders were hunched, her head lowered, like she was trying to disappear. Kesha? I whispered. She didn't answer. I locked the door behind her and told my assistant to hold all calls. Whatever was happening, it wasn't leaving this room. Take off the glasses, I said gently. She shook her head. Tears slid down her cheeks, silent and heavy. That's when I noticed the bruises on her neck, dark fingerprints, unmistakable. My stomach dropped. I stepped closer and removed the glasses myself. I will never forget what I saw. One eye was swollen shut, purple and black. Her lip was split. A deep cut ran along her cheekbone, unstitched, ignored. But worse than the injuries was her expression. The spark I'd grown up with, the girl who laughed too loud, dreamed too big, was gone. Someone had taken my sister and hollowed her out. Who did this? I asked, though I already knew. Her voice came out broken. Please, don't call the police. He said he'd kill me. I rolled up her sleeves. Bruises layered over bruises. Old ones fading into fresh ones. Burn marks. Rope marks around her wrists. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not cracked. Not bent. Shattered. I'd spent years putting abusers behind bars for strangers, and all this time the person I loved most had been suffering in silence. How long? I asked. 3 years, she whispered. 3 years of hell, and I never saw it. As she spoke, one thought consumed me. If the law had failed my sister, then I would become something else entirely. And that was the moment I made the decision that would change both our lives forever. Because instead of calling the police, I decided to take her place. To understand how my sister ended up shattered in my office, you need to understand who she was before everything went wrong, and who he pretended to be. Kesha and I weren't just twins. We were identical in every way that mattered. Same face, same voice, same habits. Growing up, even our parents mixed us up. We switched classes, pulled harmless pranks, and shared every secret. We were inseparable, two halves of the same heart. But adulthood pulled us in different directions. I chased ambition, law school, long nights, courtrooms and pressure. Kesha chose something gentler. She became an elementary school teacher, moved back to our hometown, and dreamed of a quiet life. A husband, a child, stability. Back then, I admired her for that. That's when Marcus entered her life. At first, he was perfect. That's not exaggeration. That's how predators operate. He was charming, well-dressed, and endlessly polite. A pharmaceutical sales rep with a good salary and an even better smile. The kind of man who shakes your hand firmly, looks you in the eye, and makes you believe every word he says. At their wedding, he cried during his vows. He talked about devotion, about protecting Kesha, about building a future together. I remember watching my sister glow in her dress and thinking she'd finally gotten everything she deserved. I didn't know that was the last time I'd see her truly happy for years. After the wedding, the distance started. At first, it felt normal. Marriage does that, I told myself. Then came my niece, Aaliyah. Beautiful, bright, full of life. My calls with Kesha grew shorter. Texts took longer to answer. Visits were canceled last minute. And when I did see her, something was different. She spoke less, smiled less. She flinched at loud sounds. She dressed differently, looser, duller. It was like someone was slowly turning down her volume. I told myself I was imagining it. Marriage changes people. Motherhood is exhausting. Life is stressful. Lies. All of them. What I didn't see, what Marcus made sure no one saw, was how control crept in quietly. First, it was concern. Where are you? Who were you talking to? Then it became criticism. Her clothes were too much. Her friends were bad influences. Then came isolation, and eventually, me. Marcus convinced her I made her feel small, that my success embarrassed her, that I was a threat to their marriage. So the calls stopped, and I let it happen. By the time I realized my sister was disappearing, she was already trapped in a cage he built piece by piece, using charm as the foundation and fear as the lock. And what I didn't know yet was that the first time he hit her, he'd already decided she belonged to him. But the night Marcus finally crossed the line wasn't over jealousy or rage. It was over something so small, so insignificant, that it still makes my blood boil. Kesha remembered the first time he hit her because it was such a stupid, ordinary day. That's how abuse usually begins. Not with screaming or fists, but with something so small it feels almost embarrassing to repeat. It was a Thursday evening, garbage day. She'd forgotten to roll the bins out to the curb. Marcus came home late, already drunk. The smell of alcohol hit her before he even walked through the door. She told me his eyes looked different that night. Flat, irritated, like he was looking through her instead of at her. He asked why the bins were still by the garage. She apologized. That should have been the end of it. Instead, he exploded. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her outside like she weighed nothing. Her bare feet scraped against the concrete as he slammed her face into the garbage bin. Once, twice, again. If you want to act like trash, he told her, you can stay with the trash. She didn't fight back. She didn't scream. She was in shock. This was her husband, the man who'd cried during his vows, who'd promised to protect her. Afterward, he cried. That part made me angrier than anything else. The next morning, he brought flowers. He begged for forgiveness. He blamed the alcohol, stress at work, money problems. He promised it would never happen again. And she believed him. Because that's what love teaches you to do. Especially when you don't realize you're standing at the edge of something dangerous. But it did happen again. And again. Every time Marcus lost money gambling. Every time his boss yelled at him. Every time life didn't go his way, Kesha paid for it. And then his family moved in. That's when the abuse stopped being private and became systematic. Marcus's mother, Diane, criticized everything. Her cooking, her cleaning, her parenting, her body. Nothing Keisha did was ever enough, and Marcus backed his mother every single time. Then came Tamika, Marcus's sister. Divorced, angry, and looking for someone weaker than herself. She treated Kesha like a servant, ordered her around, mocked her, and when Keisha finally pushed back, Tamika ran straight to Marcus. And Marcus punished her for disrespecting family. 3 people, 1 target. But the worst part, the part that finally broke my sister, was my niece. Aaliyah was 5 years old when Marcus slapped her for crying. 5. Kesha tried to protect her. She stepped between them. Marcus wrapped his hands around her throat and squeezed until her vision went dark. He slammed her head into the counter while his mother and sister watched. They didn't stop him. They joined in. When Kesha finished telling me all this, she was shaking so badly, I had to hold her upright. I can't leave, she whispered. He always finds me. And if I take Aaliyah, he'll kill me. That's when I understood the truth. This wasn't just abuse. It was a prison. And prisons don't open unless someone breaks the door down. That's when I looked at my sister and said the words she never expected to hear. Words that would turn me from a lawyer into something far more dangerous. I didn't decide to swap places with my sister because I was brave. I decided because every legal option had already failed her. As Kesha sat in my office, bruised and hollow, whispering about death threats and escape attempts that ended with her being dragged back, my lawyer's mind ran through every possible solution. Police reports, protective orders, emergency custody filings, shelters. And then I imagined the reality. Marcus would be questioned, and released. He'd come home furious, and Kesha would pay the price for telling the truth. That's how men like him survive. The system moves slowly. Abuse moves fast. Kesha, I said quietly, gripping her hands, you don't have to go back. Her eyes filled with panic. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do, I said. You have me. She shook her head. He'll hurt you, worse than me. That's when the idea formed, sharp, dangerous, irreversible. We're switching places. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You and I are identical, I continued, already thinking 10 steps ahead. Same face, same voice, same height, same walk. No one can tell us apart. Not him. Not his family. Kenya, no, she whispered. He's violent. You don't understand. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I understand more than you think. I explained everything. She would stay at my apartment. Safe, protected, phone off, no contact with anyone from her old life. And I would go back to her house, not as myself, as her. For 3 days, I said. That's all I need. She grabbed my arm, fingers trembling. Why would you do this? Because I'm not gentle, I didn't say. Because I don't freeze when men raise their voices. Because I've spent 10 years staring down criminals who thought fear made them powerful. Instead, I said, because I'm your sister. She cried harder than she had all day. I box, I reminded her. 3 nights a week. I know how to take a hit and how to give one. Marcus is used to control, not resistance. The moment he realizes something's different, he'll hesitate. And hesitation is everything. I wasn't planning revenge. I was building leverage, evidence, recordings, documentation, every threat, every shove, every confession. I would let them show me exactly who they were, and I would capture all of it. By the time those 3 days were over, Marcus Johnson wouldn't just lose control. He'd lose everything. I packed that night. Clothes that matched hers, her mannerisms, her posture, her voice. I practiced softness, hesitation, submission, because predators expect weakness. What they don't expect is strategy hiding behind it. When I used Kesha's key to unlock that front door the next evening, I didn't feel fear. I felt calm, focused, like a weapon that had finally been loaded. Because the moment Marcus raised his hand that night, he learned something he never expected. Kesha was no longer the woman he could break. The house looked normal from the outside. Clean lawn, quiet street, neighbors who waved and smiled. The kind of place where no one believes violence could live behind closed doors. Inside, the air felt heavy, like the walls had absorbed years of fear and never let it go. I stepped in, closing the door softly behind me, and immediately heard Diane's voice from the kitchen. Kesha, where have you been all day? Marcus will be home soon and dinner isn't even started. The entitlement in her tone made my jaw tighten. I lowered my head, softened my shoulders, and answered in my sister's gentle voice. I'm sorry, I'll start right now. She didn't even look at me. I opened the fridge and began cooking, cataloging everything like a case file. Who moved where? Who spoke? Who watched? Evidence isn't just documents, it's behavior patterns. Tamika wandered in next, collapsing onto the couch like she owned the place. Bring me a soda, she said without looking up. I did. Not because I was weak, but because I was studying her, memorizing her posture, her expressions, her sense of entitlement. Every bully has tells. I plan to use hers. Then Aaliyah came downstairs. She moved quietly, carefully, like a child who'd learned that being noticed was dangerous. Mommy, she whispered. I knelt down and opened my arms. She ran into them, trembling. In that moment, any remaining doubt vanished. This wasn't about punishing Marcus. This was about protecting a child. At 8 o'clock, the garage door rumbled open. Marcus was already drunk. He didn't say hello, didn't acknowledge his daughter, didn't thank anyone for the meal placed in front of him. He took one bite and exploded. This is disgusting, he snapped. What is wrong with you? Diane joined in immediately. Tamika laughed. Marcus stood up and stepped toward me, his body language familiar, predatory, practiced. He raised his hand, and I caught his wrist. The shock on his face was priceless. He pulled. I didn't move. I squeezed just enough to hurt, just enough to confuse him. Not tonight, Marcus, I said softly. I released him and walked away. The room went silent. For the first time in years, no one knew what to do next. I tucked Ilea into bed, read her a story about a princess who saved herself, and sat there until her breathing evened out. Down the hall, I heard whispers. Fear, confusion. The hierarchy had cracked, and when abusers lose control, they don't retreat. They escalate. And sure enough, by morning, Marcus was done pretending. Because when men like him feel threatened, they use the only weapon they think still works. The next morning, Marcus was sober. That scared me more than his drinking ever could. He was waiting when I came back from dropping Aliyah at school, standing in the bedroom doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes cold. This wasn't a tantrum. This was calculation. "We need to talk," he said. "Now." I followed him inside and closed the door behind us. The moment it clicked shut, his mask dropped. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," he said, stepping closer, "but it ends today. You embarrassed me in front of my family." Then he grabbed my arm. Hard. His fingers dug in exactly where Kesha's bruises had been forming for years. This was muscle memory for him. Habit. He was used to her freezing, apologizing, shrinking. I didn't react. I let him squeeze. Because every second of this was being recorded. "You think you can change overnight?" he sneered. "You think acting tough makes you equal to me?" I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. "You're hurting me, Marcus." "Good," he said. "Maybe you'll remember your place." That was his mistake. He drew his fist back. I moved. One clean shift of weight. A controlled deflection. His balance was already off. Men who rely on intimidation rarely expect resistance. I swept his legs out from under him, and he hit the floor hard, the sound sharp and final. I stood over him. "Don't ever do that again," I said. Then I walked out. I didn't hear him get up. An hour later, the police showed up. Marcus had called them. 2 officers stood in the doorway as he spun a story about me snapping, about how he feared for his safety. I let him talk, let him perform. Then I handed them a folder. Medical reports, photos, time-stamped recordings, and finally, video. Marcus grabbing my arm, threatening me, pulling his fist back. The older officer's face hardened. "How long has this been going on?" he asked quietly. 3 years, I said. They warned Marcus, filed a report, told him plainly that if they were called back, he'd be arrested. When the door closed behind them, Marcus looked smaller somehow. Humiliated, cornered. He couldn't hit me, he couldn't scare me, and now he couldn't use the law against me either. That's when I knew the danger wasn't over. Because when abusers lose physical and legal control, they don't stop. They outsource. That evening, Tamika brought home help. A man twice my size with violence written all over him. And the moment he stepped into that living room, I knew exactly what they were trying to do. Because Marcus hadn't given up. He just decided to let someone else hurt me instead. Tamika's boyfriend arrived just after sunset. He didn't knock. He walked in like he owned the place. Tall, wide shoulders, thick neck. The kind of man who believed size alone made him dangerous. Tamika hovered behind him with a satisfied smile, like she'd finally brought in the muscle to put me back in my place. "So," he said, rolling his shoulders, "you the one causing problems in this house?" I stayed seated on the couch, calm, measured. Fear feeds men like him. I wasn't about to give him a single drop. "Problems?" I asked. "I live here." He laughed. "Marcus says you've been acting crazy, disrespecting people." Tamika crossed her arms. She thinks she's tough now. He stepped closer. Too close. Close enough that he expected me to flinch. I didn't. He reached for my arm. That was his mistake. I moved fast. Sidestep, grip, pivot. His momentum did the rest. A clean throw. 250 pounds of arrogance crashed through the coffee table in an explosion of glass and wood. The house went silent. He stared up at me, stunned, bleeding from his elbow. That, I said calmly, was assault. And it's all on camera. His eyes flicked around the room. Cameras. He hadn't seen them. They never do. He scrambled to his feet and ran. Tamika screamed at me, calling me a demon, a monster. Marcus and Diane watched from the doorway, frozen, not angry anymore. Afraid. That night, they stopped confronting me directly. Instead, they whispered. And my cameras caught everything. In Diane's bedroom, the three of them huddled together like criminals planning their next move. Marcus was pacing. Tamika was frantic. Diane was thinking. We can't touch her, Marcus said. We can't scare her. We can't call the cops. Then we get rid of her, Tamika snapped. Diane lowered her voice. Not like that. We make her disappear. Legally. My blood ran cold. Sleeping pills, Diane continued. We put them in her coffee. When she's out, we call mental health services. Say she's violent, unstable. They'll take her. And while she's gone, Marcus said slowly, I file for custody. There it was, the final line they were willing to cross. The next morning, Diane handed me a cup of coffee with a sweet smile and poison swirling at the bottom. I pretended to drink, poured it out when no one was looking. Then I sat down and waited. I let my eyes close, let my head droop, let my body go limp. She's out, Diane whispered. That's when I sat up. The screams were almost satisfying. I heard everything, I said calmly. And I recorded all of it. 3 faces. 3 expressions of pure terror. They didn't realize it yet, but the game was over. Because now they had a choice. Sign away everything. Or spend the rest of their lives explaining their crimes to a judge. They sat at the dining table like strangers in their own home. Marcus's hands shook. Diane wouldn't stop crying. Tamika stared at the floor, silent for the first time since I'd arrived. Fear had replaced entitlement. I laid the folders out slowly, one by one. Medical records, photos, audio files, video stills, bank statements. 3 years of evidence, I said evenly. And the last 2 days added enough charges to bury all of you. Marcus tried to speak. Failed. Tried again. You can't do this. I already have, I replied. I explained it carefully. Felony domestic violence, child abuse, attempted poisoning, conspiracy, false reporting. If I walked into the district attorney's office on Monday morning, they'd be in handcuffs by lunch. Silence swallowed the room. Then I placed the divorce papers on the table. Choice 1, I said. Prison. Decades of it. I slid the papers closer. Choice 2, you sign, you leave. You never come near Kesha or Aaliyah again. Marcus sobbed. Real ugly sobs. The same man who'd terrorized my sister couldn't even hold a pen steady. Full custody to Kesha, no visitation. Child support locked in. House remains hers. Restraining orders against all 3 of them. You have until 5 o'clock, I said. Or I make the call. When I left to pick up Aaliyah, my hands finally started shaking, not from fear, but release. I brought her to my apartment. Kesha was waiting. The moment they saw each other, they collapsed into tears. Aaliyah touched her mother's face like she was afraid she'd disappear again. You look happy, she said softly. Kesha smiled through tears. I am, baby. At 4:30, Marcus called. We'll sign. We returned to the house together, twinned side by side. The looks on their faces were worth everything. Marcus signed first, Diane next, Tamika last. Every signature sounded like a door slamming shut. You have 24 hours, I said. I'll be back with the sheriff. As we walked out, Marcus asked one final question. Who are you? I didn't stop walking. Someone who doesn't let monsters win. That night, my sister slept without fear for the first time in 3 years. But the real ending didn't come with signatures. It came months later, when justice finally caught up with everything they'd done. Freedom doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, in moments you don't expect. The day after the papers were signed, I returned to the house with a sheriff's deputy. Marcus, Diane, and Tamika were gone. The rooms were empty, no shouting, no tension hanging in the air, just silence. I changed every lock, installed visible security cameras this time, not hidden, not subtle. Cameras that said this house is protected now. When Kesha walked back inside with Aaliyah, she hesitated at the doorway, like her body was still waiting for permission to breathe. It's yours, I said softly. All of it. She stepped in, and nothing happened. No yelling, no footsteps, no fear. She cried harder than she had in my office days earlier, but this time it wasn't from pain. Over the next weeks, the transformation was slow but undeniable. Kesha slept through the night. She laughed again, real laughter, not the quiet, careful sound she'd learned to survive with. She went back to teaching and rediscovered why she loved it. Aaliyah changed too. She stopped flinching when doors closed. She stopped whispering in her own home. She started drawing pictures of her and her mom holding hands under bright suns. Marcus tried to fight the custody order. Of course he did. Men like him always believe the world will bend back in their favor. It didn't. In family court, I laid everything out: medical records, recordings, videos, witness statements. The judge didn't even hesitate. Marcus Johnson lost all parental rights: no visits, no calls, no access. Child support came through every month. He sold his car, cashed out his retirement, struggled, good. Consequences should hurt. Diane filed for bankruptcy after liquidating her hidden savings. Tamika disappeared back into someone else's chaos. The three of them scattered, no longer a united front, no longer powerful. And Kesha? She healed. Months later, she met someone kind, gentle, patient. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. She'd learned something far more important than romance. She learned her worth. People ask me if I regret it. If I regret impersonating my sister, manipulating the situation, playing a dangerous game with dangerous people. My answer is simple. No. Because the system didn't protect her. It failed her for 3 years. And when the system fails, someone has to step in. I became what my sister needed. Not a lawyer, not a vigilante, a shield. One afternoon at the park, Aaliyah looked up at me while eating ice cream and said, "Aunt Kenya, thank you for saving my mommy." That was it. That was the moment I knew I'd crossed the right lines. And if you think this story ends here, if you think this was just about my sister, then you're missing the most important truth of all. People like to believe stories like this are rare. They aren't. They happen behind quiet doors, on clean streets, in houses that look exactly like Marcus's did. They happen to people who smile at work, who show up for family dinners, who tell themselves it's not that bad yet. My sister wasn't weak. She was conditioned. Abuse doesn't start with violence. It starts with control, with isolation, with small permissions taken away until leaving feels more dangerous than staying. Marcus didn't break Kesha overnight. He dismantled her slowly, methodically, the way cowards do. And the world helped him. Every time someone said, "Marriage is hard," every time someone said, "He seems like a nice guy," every time someone told her to be patient, silence is an accomplice. What I did wasn't heroic. It was necessary. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I refused to play by rules that only protect abusers. I listened. I documented. I waited. And when the moment came, I acted. Would I recommend this to everyone? No. Swapping places with an abuser is dangerous, reckless, not something most people could survive. I had training, resources, and a legal background. And even then, it nearly went wrong. But here's what should happen instead. Victims should be believed the first time. Protective orders should actually protect. Children shouldn't have to grow up learning fear before they learn safety. Kesha still has scars. Healing isn't a straight line. Some nights, loud noises still make her tense. Some days, she still questions her instincts. But she's free. And freedom changes everything. She teaches Aaliyah that love doesn't hurt. That home is supposed to feel safe. That strength isn't loud, it's steady. As for Marcus, he fades. That's the real punishment for men like him. Not just prison or court orders, but irrelevance. No audience, no power, no one left to control. And me? I went back to my life. my cases, my courtrooms. But I'm different now because I know exactly how thin the line is between safety and danger and how often that line is guarded by nothing but hope. If you're reading this and something feels familiar, listen to that feeling. If you know someone who's disappearing the way my sister did, don't wait. And if you ever wonder what you'd do for the person you love most in the world, now you know what I'd do. Every time. Because the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. They're the ones hiding in plain sight, counting on everyone else to look away.